Pop Shield, a long-form discussion podcast about musical topics both past and present. I'm Gabe, and I'm joined as always by Dan.
Hello.
And Darren.
Hello.
You know, I like to start each episode by asking you guys if you've listened to anything interesting lately.
Yeah, I'm just real excited for that new Bob Dylan documentary about the Rolling Thunder review. So, lots of Dylan, a lot of bootleg Volume 5 and Desire going on around here.
I have not listened to much outside of what we'll be discussing today. I've been just so caught up in the Game of Thrones fever. I just haven't been able to listen to any music.
Yeah, I suppose I should mention, or I should apologize, that we're actually a few days late on this episode, and I think that was part of your busyness. Not totally Game of Thrones business, right. I assume. But I have been in a huge Stereolab kick, because they recently reissued their second and third album, Transient Random Noise, blah, 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 long title, and Mars Audiac Quintet. I had actually never listened to Mars Audiac Quintet before, and I don't know, I'm loving them in a way I never even did before. 'Cause, they get into that like exotica. We talked about them on our old podcast, that like kind of, sample based like kind of stuff later on. But early on, they have this like extreme krautrock, like Sister Ray kind of noisy guitar thing mixed in with that. And I don't know, it's kind of blowing my mind this week. But anyway, let's get into today's topic. A couple weeks ago, as I'm sure literally everybody knows, Beyonce briefly broke the internet by surprise releasing Homecoming, a concert film and accompanying live album that document her universally acclaimed headlining set at Coachella 2018. Naturally, the album also earned rave reviews from seriously everybody, including Pitchfork's highest score in years, a 9.3. I thought they just weren't ever going to give a score like that again. And its success, the success of this live album, got us thinking about the future of live albums in the age of streaming, poptimism, and on-demand video. So, we're going to talk plenty of Beyonce, but we're also going to try to figure out what Homecoming can teach us about where music, and especially recorded live music, is heading. Now, before we get started, we should mention that not all of us have watched the film because we really wanted to try to figure out if this thing works as an album or not. But let's just try to describe this concert as a whole. What kinds of songs does she choose? And also want to get into that theme. But if we could just describe this set, what was it like?
I mean, the set is sort of like, the songs you would think Beyonce would play. It was all hits. I'm not the biggest Beyonce fan. I've heard all their albums, at least a time or two, but I'm not overly familiar with her. But I think every song on this concert I at least knew sort of well. Yeah,
I think it's you could probably argue it's pretty career spanning, right? We see Destiny's Child songs coming in. And obviously a lot of Lemonade, some older hits like you'd mentioned, some that were notably left off, but for the most part, I think she included pretty much all of her solo hits.
Yeah, I mean, this thing is enormous, obviously. It's like 40 tracks long, and it does feel kind of like a career retrospective. I think that, all the biggest hits seem to be here, and, I like Dan, I'm not like the hugest fan, but I feel like I basically knew everything. And you're right, we should talk about the guests, because I think most notably, we get the other two members of Destiny's Child, Kelly Rowland and Michelle Williams, join for a little medley of classic Destiny's Child hits. But we also have, Jay-Z shows up. I don't know if you guys know this, but Solange shows up just to dance during one of the songs, so you don't actually hear her. You've got this, J Balvin guy, this kind of, reggaeton, like Latin pop thing happens. But most importantly, and this could help us sort of talk about the theme of the thing, is this absolutely enormous group of, I forget what she calls them, like the bees or the buzz players or something like that.
Or whatever.
We got drumline, we got horns, we got strings, dancers. So, if we could try to describe that theme, it's basically this kind of like historically black colleges and universities vibe, like this drum line, like this rich tradition of these kind of really celebratory dancing kind of things. But, how would you guys describe the way these songs are kind of like, mashed into this new vibe?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool, honestly. It took this from being, just a show where she played all her hits, one after another, where she made them like, all connect. They're all sort of reimagined to include like this drum line sort of thing, rather than like electronic drums or just a regular drum set. I mean that stuff's still there, but it's much more built around this like buzz drum line thing. I thought it was like a nice way to tie everything together, especially when you're doing something like career spanning like that. It's easy to do when you're just touring off one album, only playing Lemonade and maybe a couple hits. But she truly does go from the beginning with Destiny's Child to her most current stuff. So it gives it that anchor.
Well, and it's really interesting that she does a career spanning set and manages to incorporate this like drum line throughout. You know what I mean? A lot of, when you think of like a career spanning set, you almost just imagine just a greatest hits album just being played out, and the different instrumentation that is required for all these different songs. But here it's just kind of all connected with the same theme. Like you have the drum line and the horns, like even on like the Destiny's Child tracks, which are notoriously very 90s, very thin sounding, receives like new life with this drum line. And then throughout you have like these moments of, I mean, obviously I didn't see the film, so I'm imagining there was a lot of visuals involved in the little snippets of her. I don't know, was she giving like an interview or something, like kind of talking about the process of putting this together?
Yeah, it's basically like, I did watch the film. I think I'm the only one, correct, to watch it?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like the it's like what's it? The Last Waltz. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. Maybe the most famous concert film ever, where we kind of occasionally go like behind the scenes to her setting this thing up and working really hard on it and being like stressed out and stuff. I have a lot to say about that. I think those parts are pretty boring and they feel pretty manufactured. Beyonce is like the kind of person who just she just like controls her image so intensely, and it's got this whole thing where it's like as if she's kind of talking like they put an effect on her voice, like as if she's like talking through the phone or something, and it's like faux intimacy.
Wait, she was doing that live?
No. This is like the the behind the scenes. It's the setup of the concert. It's like, so just like many times actually in the middle of the show, we just kind of like go to like this black and white grainy footage of like behind the scenes and stuff, and she's like narrating something, and sometimes there'll be quotes from different like feminist authors and stuff, but it's kind of like a faux intimacy. It's like, it just makes it sound like like even the phone voice is like, oh, you're getting like this really close look into her, but she's doing stuff like leading her dancers in a prayer, and just stuff that like makes her look good, basically. So yeah, I didn't care that much for that. But to describe the actual show to you guys, it's basically like a huge kind of bleacher pyramid looking thing, and it's just covered in people. They are, obviously all coordinated, dress wise and everything, but you've got like these dancers, you've got these horn players, you've got these string players. You can sort of hear throughout the album that like their stomps and claps and yells and stuff are part of it. And I gotta say, it's like pretty amazing, honestly. Like, because when she first comes out, it's sort of awkward because sometimes she'll have like some of the people just sort of sit there like perfectly still, like they're statues or something like that. But then they use this. It's a great effect when something kind of crescendos and everybody starts dancing like together. Like just this explosion of energy on the stage. And I wanted to ask you guys, you were saying, Danny, you like the sound of this horn stuff. Did you ever feel like it was a little bit like overstuffed, like maybe a little cacophonous? Because watching the film, sometimes it's like kind of amazing, like how many people, I mean, like hundreds of people are on the stage, all like just moving. But when you're listening, it sounds a little busy, maybe.
I didn't really think that, but I mean, it sounded like what I think of when I think of like, a drum line or a marching band or something. So it didn't strike me as like, being shoehorned in or overstuffed or anything. But, I mean, I honestly, I didn't realize that there was like a ton of people. You know, I would have guessed there was like 10 or something.
Really?
Yeah.
I think it sounds like a huge group.
Yeah,
You know, Darren?
I was really kind of fascinated thinking about like just how this stuff gets recorded. I kind of always do that when I'm listening to like a live album. You know what I mean?
I did think
And,
that. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, and especially with like a drum line, because they're not obviously plugged into anything unless they had like, the horns had like little mics on them, and I don't know if they did, but I was pretty impressed by how well, like sonically, I was able to kind of hear.
It's mixed. It's mixed well. Yeah.
Yeah, the different horns and then the drums all like kind of together. Like it didn't sound like some at live albums things just get very murky because there's just so much going on and things get drowned out. But
I wonder if there's overdubs and stuff, on the record. A lot of people in like 60s, 70s when they did live albums, they'd basically play over them back in the studio. I don't know whether or not Beyonce did that.
I know. I'm not sure because it sounds like sometimes like suspiciously perfect. She never sounds like out of breath.
I was thinking the exact same thing, like because I didn't watch it, but I was thinking about it when listening. Like I know she's dancing a lot and
the entire time. Yeah.
If you just had me sit completely still and sing for an hour and 49 minutes, I'd be out of breath. But if I moved at all, so I was thinking that I wondered if because there wasn't even like. I know it's cut. I know it is cut between two shows. There's 2 weekends of Coachella.
Yes.
But I mean, I guess maybe if you don't make the same mistake in the same place, you can cut from the other show. But yeah, I thought that that she doesn't make a single misstep.
It's kind of interesting because on the movie, they kind of use this actually in a really cool way because one weekend, Coachella is 2 weekends, so she plays twice, presumably the same exact set. And one weekend, everybody's like all of her dancers are wearing yellow, and the other time they're all wearing pink. And her outfits changed between the weekends as well. That's cool. And they just cut like between them at will, and it kind of makes like this really almost like psychedelic effect when like the beat drops and all of a sudden everybody's pink and dancing. It's kind of really really cool. But it's interesting because sometimes you're like she's clearly not singing like to the track correctly, and you're like, oh, this must be the audio from the other performance, or it's an overdub, and I'll never actually know. But she does sound amazing, honestly.
I mean, don't like a lot of pop live like performances involve like just like a plain backing track playing? You know what I mean? Like,
well, you can tell that that's
over it. And
not
stuff,
really the case here.
Okay. I didn't think so, but I mean, there's definitely some situations, but I also assumed. She had background vocalists, and she does mention those. Like,
she does. She certainly does.
Credits or whatever. So,
yeah, I mean, there's a huge team there, but I guess you're right. I guess I took it as sounding a little bit busy, but all things considered, that you're recording a drum line who is actually moving around the entire time, and you're recording people's stomps and shouts and stuff. It actually is like kind of an amazing technical achievement that they actually recorded this. And yeah, there's either a little bit of overdubbing going on, which honestly I don't care about, or she's like truly the greatest live singer I've ever heard because James Brown sounds more winded than her on his live albums. But I want to talk about this theme a little bit more, okay? Because I think it's absolutely fascinating. So this historically black college and university culture, this drumline culture, where throughout this set, she does a lot of, the band does a lot of this like musical quoting, like they would do at a pep rally, like little at a football game, like little teases of Spotty Odie Dopalicious or like UGK or Drake, I notice, or we get like a little California Love thing. These are the kind of songs that these drum lines play. Right. And I find this very fascinating for a whole bunch of reasons, but on one hand, is it kind of impressive that, I was trying to think of like, what if a rock band did this? And just like in the middle of their set, they were just kind of like, they played like a few bars of like Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones or something. Wouldn't you kind of just have the impression like, wow, I'm watching a band that's not as good as the music that they're quoting? Is it amazing kind of that Beyonce's songs don't feel overshadowed by all these other classics that she's quoting here?
I think the reason it doesn't feel like that is because with rock, if you do that, you're just covering it. But hip hop and everything, pop is built on sampling. And so, it just seems like a much more, recognizable sample than everything. So yeah, I don't think it would work with a rock band, play, if during Don't Stop Making Sense, Talking Heads started playing, Stairway to Heaven, you'd be like, what the fuck's going on? But it makes sense here, because it's built on one, like you said, the drum lines and everything do that naturally, and just the way the music is built on sampling.
Yeah, you'd have to do it in such a way that you wouldn't have to worry about drawing comparisons. Like if a rock band does that, you're almost immediately thinking like, okay, well, he's playing the guitar and attempting to sing. You know what I mean? Like it's an immediate comparison. But if you do something like totally different, such as like Beyonce actually like handing it off to this drum line to sort of do that sort of thing, I don't know. I went along with it. I thought it was.
I took it as, and again, I wasn't watching, just listening, but I took it as like a way for her to have, breathers and maybe even costume change. I don't know if she changes at all, but that's how I took it.
This is really the genius of this set, is like there are pretty good sections where she's like not even there because she's doing some kind of costume change, or she kind of like moves around a little bit. There's a point where she's like up on a huge, I don't even know what to call it, like balcony that gets like sort of raised like way above the audience. It's kind of like a St. Pablo tour ripoff a little bit, but so she's kind of like doing stuff where she disappears, and I'm like, holy shit, it's actually brilliant that basically what she's done is brought in a bunch of people who are like the best in the country at just making people hyped. Like that's literally what they do. They do pep rallies and they do football games and they make people hyped as shit. And that's why like when you hear, one of these like classic, like just a few bars of one of these classic hip hop songs, these like Southern hip hop songs, what that does at a football game in Alabama is just gets people fucking hyped. And it's kind of genius that she doesn't even have to be on the stage and the energy does not fade whatsoever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean it's brilliant. I mean, it gets you hyped just listening to the record. Sitting at your desk. I imagine in a I don't know how many people are at Coachella, but yeah, exactly. Like when you're with 100,000 other people and whatnot, it's definitely going to get you amped.
I mean, I guess I will say, and I wonder how you feel, Darren. I mean, there are points where it's a little bit. Maybe a little weird in a audio context because, it's like there will be these things where these little skits, which I guess are part of this kind of culture, like these little kind of joking, like bugaboo skits, they're called. And there are points where like the drum line is just going, and what's happening is like there's somebody with a baton and she's doing the most amazing shit where she's like throwing it 100 feet up in the air and doing like front flips and catching it. And, just none of that comes across on the audio. I also thought about like sometimes she does these like sort of pregnant pauses, where it'll be like in the middle of a song, she like kind of interrupts it and then, like just like holds it for a moment and then comes back in. And that stuff is like really great in a visual setting. Mm-hmm. But did you feel, Darren, like some of this stuff was just not really translating?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, but I mean, if you've seen Beyonce, like her Super Bowl halftime performance, if you've seen any kind of performance of Beyonce's, I think it's not too difficult to sort of imagine what's happening. Like when she's sort of giving that direction about, make me laugh and then like get going or whatever, and they start doing their like, sounds like a march of some sort.
Right.
I can just kind of imagine it, but it doesn't like land nearly as well as it would visually. But, to be honest, like I'm glad that sort of thing stays on the live album, and this is something that maybe we can get into later, but like I really prefer the live album to try to feel as real to the actual performance as possible, and not just cut things out and just go song after song after song. You know what I mean?
I completely agree. I love a live album that is like one complete show. Yeah. And I know this is that, but over 2 weekends, which is okay. It's better, but like
not
things
my
like
preference either.
Yeah, like I love when it's like this is a concert that happened, but
you're right.
That's my favorite thing about a live album, because otherwise it's just when you have like little cut up things, most of the time it's like you're just it's a shittier than the studio version that way. But when it's a whole show, it's like a historical document at that point sometimes, depending on the artist and everything.
Yeah, you're right. The other thing that I find. Actually, the thing I find almost most fascinating about this entire album, in kind of she's basically putting her own discography in the context of this drumline culture, this historically Black college and university culture. And basically, the way that functions, like I was just saying, is they're playing like they kind of play little snippets of like the greatest, just the classic songs. And there's this whole like very self-conscious thing to this album, which is like this kind of celebration of Black culture, right? And I just like I basically am torn whether this is like a tribute or the most like hubris I've ever heard on record. Because what she's doing basically is putting like her own music at the center of Black culture. She's like basically brought on a bunch of people who are like literally they're professional like celebrators of Black culture. That's what they do at Alabama football games. And she's like at the very center of all of this, is my music. I mean, isn't that kind of like astonishing?
Yeah, I mean, when you put it that way, but I didn't really take it like that, I took it as like, I don't know, maybe like, I don't know. When you say it that way, it's hard to argue against you, but I mean, I didn't take it that way.
I can't prove that she's wrong because, in fact, I think a lot of these songs
maybe that's part of it.
But there's something about like, well, I don't know. Before I go on, did you get that vibe at all, Darren?
I mean, I totally can see where you're coming from, and I agree. But at the same time, I feel like Beyonce has like been positioning herself like this for a while now. You know what I mean? I think ever since, just that whole vibe of like the Beehive, and I've come across individuals that I don't really know very well, but they are so open about their adoration for Beyonce, you know what I mean, that they will talk about it at any given moment, like coworkers, whatever, you know what I mean? And like it was in those moments where I really realized that like, gee, like Beyonce really is like the center of the
this culture, this musical, so she that's the thing is like she might not be wrong, but this is kind of like a bold thing to do. And I also, this is like a little conspiracy theory type stuff, but on the cover of this album, she is basically dressed as like Nefertiti, like a ancient Egyptian pharaoh, pharaoh, I don't know if that's a word. And so basically, and she does a little like at the beginning of the concert, she's kind of dressed that way, and then there's something like kind of subtle about the way that the bleacher is in the shape of a pyramid, and I'm thinking like, that is a super Egyptian move actually to like, because no culture ever was more obsessed than them with like their legacy and monuments to their legacy and celebrations of them. And, I'm thinking like, is she kind of like pulling a pharaoh move here? Like I'm going to basically create a giant monument to myself. And I think that's like the central tension of this album, because the whole documentary, I'm like, I'm not sure I buy it, but she's like, obviously is just talking about like, oh, this is a celebration of my culture, my dancers, like the musicians that are on here. Like, I just love them so much and I want to give them a platform. Black music, this historically Black college and university culture. And yet it's all a celebration of Beyonce, Right. Is it a tribute to that or is it a tribute to Beyonce?
I get what you're saying, and I mean, I do in one sense like agree with you. I think Beyonce is very like calculated, and her whole image, everything is like everything is like thought over before anything happens.
Incredibly self-aware.
Yeah, exactly. But also, I mean, if she is genuine in that and she does want to celebrate, like, of course she's gonna like. What do you want her to do? Like, just do a show of covers? Like her doing her own music, that's her music. What else is she going to play, Do you get what I'm saying?
I mean, I guess, if you really want to go like deep with it, I mean, every performance is this like at its heart, it really is sort of like a narcissistic enterprise to think that you should be on a stage in front of people, but there's still something like, and I'm not trying to like criticize at all. I think it's actually really interesting because Kanye obviously has taken this to like its heights. He will be on a pyramid, like an enormous pyramid, and there's like angels carrying him, and he's declaring himself a god and stuff. And so Kanye is like basically just 100% self-aware. The weird thing here that gives me like just this slightly queasy feeling is that like Beyonce is not being honest about it as Kanye is. She's like pretending like it's a celebration of Black culture when it's a celebration of her. And it's I'm really not trying to like give a value judgment to that. I just think there's something so fascinating about the fact that she chose to dress as an Egyptian pharaoh on the cover of her album. Maybe it's like, oh, Black history, but maybe it's, I run this shit and I am the queen, bow down bitches, as she says.
I mean, she does like, they do literally like refer to her as Queen Bee. So,
right.
And I'm sure, she had something to do with that. So it's
she leans into it. She totally leans into it.
Yeah, exactly. She's not like, oh, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Exactly. Bringing up Kanye is a good thing. Like Kanye at least comes out and says, there's a famous interview where the guy asked him, like, what did you mean when you said I am a god? And he said, I told you I am a god. At least like he comes out and says it to your face, where like, maybe Beyonce's just dressing herself up like a,
it's symbolic,
Egyptian god,
Don't worry.
exactly. Like it's like you have that little bit of an exit from it, but
yeah. And then, on another level, throughout the album, and I have a hard time the movie does this kind of too, but in a different way, because it like will show quotes on the screen and stuff, but it'll like play quotes, from basically famous feminist writers, thinkers, like race scholars, Malcolm X, I think, is here a little bit, Maya Angelou, those kinds of people. And that again, if you're gonna like, if we're talking about hubris, I mean, she's basically positioning herself as being like among these people. I mean, she's really probably not wrong at all. Like, as far as her effect on culture, it's got to be, I don't know. It almost I feel scared to even say it, but it's something like a Malcolm X or something. I mean, she's huge. She's like absolutely inspired so many people to like think differently about themselves and maybe think differently about police brutality or any other thing. But there's like this whole thing about, sometimes people criticize Beyonce, and you were just talking about it, for being like overly calculative and like really about her brand, and that she jumps on like feminist issues and race issues when it's like financially tenable and not a moment before. And there's something really bold about being like, I am just like Maya Angelou,
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, how radical is that if you're just there at the right moment? You know what I mean? And you're not the one kind of like leading the way or at the forefront or at the bleeding edge or whatever. And you mentioned Kanye and everything. I mean, look at the two in terms of like their public images, right? And like how the general public views them. Everybody pretty much like worships Beyonce, whereas they think Kanye is narcissistic and, so into himself, and like no one really just wants to like him, right?
Right.
So if Beyonce, it's just like, it's a business thing. You know what I mean? Like you're going to sit down in some corporate office and you're going to talk about Beyonce as like the brand, not Beyonce Knowles, the person. You're talking about the brand Beyonce and what's good for the brand. You know what I mean? What would not be good for the brand is Beyonce coming out and like literally just saying like, no, I am a queen. Like I literally am a queen. Yeah. Like you should all just bow down right now. I'm not going to continue the show unless you bow down. Like something wild like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I just think like the politics of this album are absolutely fascinating, and they're actually only fascinating because she is such a huge force of nature. She is like an absolute icon.
And she's earned it. She's totally earned it. I mean, every decision, whatever business decision that they made, look where she's at, It's a big deal that she's headlining, or that she headlined Coachella,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's another thing that this is like the first Black woman to ever headline Coachella. And there's a lot of, she mentions that, she like mentions that in the show a couple times. She often, says these kind of platitudes, like shouting out like her strong ladies and stuff like that in the audience. So, and I kind of have this theory, I guess, maybe this is too off topic, but I have this theory that like huge, like these mega figures of history, like, I don't know, anybody from like Martin Luther King Jr. to Gandhi or something like that. Like you have to have a little bit of narcissism to like want to deal with the shit that you get for being like in the public eye like that. And I think that we need people like that in the world, because personally, if somebody was like, we need you to like take all the shit that Martin Luther King Jr. took, not to mention getting killed for it, but I would be like, no, I'd rather just kind of like live a normal life. I'm just not brave enough. But you need to be like a little bit like have this drive to be king, sort of. So Beyonce's got that in spades. Anyway, to return to the album, we were talking about like, it's basically a career retrospective. Is this more or less just a greatest hits album, or does she do enough to like really reinvent these familiar songs? Or alternatively, is she really just kind of reselling her fans old shit?
I think it's not just a greatest hits album. I think she does, this whole thing with like making it fit this mold with the drum line and everything, like changes it enough that this is, while familiar, something a little new. Like if you were at a party or a bar or something and you put on Drunken Love, but you put on this version, people will be like, oh, it's Drunken Love, but then they'll be like, hold on, something's a little different about it, you know? Like you would definitely like realize it's not just the straight, one you heard on the radio or on the record, which I think, is good. I like that on a live album when somebody just plays, and even, when you're just going to a show, like if somebody just plays it exactly like sitting at home listening to the regular record, what's the point of a live album or a live show? And so I think, doing all this other stuff around it changes it enough to make it worth listening to, at least a time or two.
Yeah, to your point, Dan, one of the worst like live shows I ever went to was Vampire Weekend, where I felt like they just simply played every song note for note so perfectly, along with the records that they came from, that I mean, that it was entertaining, but at the same time, like there was just nothing that made it feel, like a genuine show here in Tampa or whatever. You know what I mean? It just didn't give that kind of vibe. So like with Beyonce, to your question, Gabe, I think she does. I think she accomplishes, I think she does exactly what Dan was sort of describing. Like she doesn't create a greatest hits album. She actually changes up the formula for a lot of songs. And I mentioned before, those Destiny's Child songs. I mean, listen to Say My Name. You'll recognize maybe the first verse and the chorus, but then the song takes a shift, you know what I mean? And it shifts in a way that you've never really heard before. Still familiar with it, but making it, very interesting. The song like Run the World, it obviously samples Major Laser's song, but this time it's played by the drum line. And even though it's like very similar to the original beat, like you can tell it's the drum line that's involved in it and not just some backing track. And that's important, you know what I mean? It just gives it a little more authenticity and a little more thoughtfulness to the theatrics of the performance, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of felt like some songs really are transformed more easily than others, like because some of them are like highly kind of electronic, pop-esque, and sometimes it sounds to me like it's basically the backing track that a drumline is playing on top of, but other times they really are successfully reinvented. And you're right, what you were saying earlier, that just overall it adds like this kind of new cohesion to this body of work that really didn't exist before. And, I kind of think like part of the purpose of a greatest hits album is to kind of like allow you to reassess somebody's, how like their entire career arc in a new light. And this really does it because, well, I guess again, I'm like sort of torn because I was saying earlier, like, is this a tribute or is this self-glorification? I'm also thinking like, is this like a bold artistic reinvention of these old songs, or is it selling old shit? We should mention that there's 40 songs. A lot of times they're like quite short because it's just sort of like a mini piece of one of these songs. And I'm sure this has made a lot of big streaming money, as it just so happens that it fits really well in the streaming age and allows her to resell old material,
Yeah, I mean, obviously, somebody records an album like this or whatnot for money. You don't just do it, especially at the level of like Beyonce. You're not just doing it like because you feel like doing it. And I don't, people talk about selling out and all that crap. Who gives a shit? Like if somebody, I make drone music. If someone was like, hey, I'll give you $1 million to write the shittiest pop hook, I would do it. So I don't think that's a negative at all. Good for her.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say, and this even I keep going back to Destiny's Child because it sort of felt like a little forced. Like she just sort of like parades the former members of Destiny's Child out just for a couple of like very quick songs, like
to celebrate her.
Yeah, because Say My Name is like it's there, but it's like it's over in an instant. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's sort of like the thing with like Coachella and stuff, though. Like I think the headliners always sort of, like supposed to or expected to kind of bring out surprise guests and everything. Like Ariana Grande just this past one, brought out like NSYNC except JT, and even Kanye brought out like Pusha T and stuff when he headlined Coachella in 2010. It's just sort of like I don't know if you have to do it or but it's at least sort of expected.
Yeah, there's also sort of like a weird attention span thing. Like I was watching the Coachella live stream a couple weeks ago, and these artists these pop artists, they'll play like just like 30 seconds of their hits, like in rapid succession.
It's because I think it's especially at a festival where those people like, when you go see a band, if Beyonce was coming to your local stadium, you show up an hour before she gets on stage and then you watch Beyonce. These people have been standing there for like 2 fucking days. Everyone's tired. It's hard to keep the energy up. And so I think when you just like keep throwing out little morsels of like songs that like, because when you're at something like that and a big song that right when it comes on, you get really excited, but 4 minutes later that excitement's worn off. But if you just keep rapid fire 30 seconds here and there, it keeps the crowd hyped. And that's just, and also you got to think at like these festivals, people aren't just necessarily there to see the headline. If you go to the stadium show, those people paid to see Beyonce. Someone here, they might have like just gone to Coachella to go to Coachella. They might have gone to see someone else, but Beyonce's there, so they'll see it.
There's also like kind of a pop hip hop problem, which is that there are so many guest appearances on every song that
you can't do
it's awkward to just play like the whole thing and just have like, I don't know, over the speakers, just somebody else's voice rapping. So they just kind of like play the half that they sing on. So I don't know, they're working it out. But I did want to, in returning to this idea of like recontextualizing old material, again, to get political, sorry, I think it's pretty interesting. Well, I want to ask you guys, do you have a problem with this at all? Where basically what she's doing, she's taking stuff like Destiny's Child, Crazy in Love, like these kind of, some of these early hits, and she's basically positioning the whole set as if the purpose of her music has always been to celebrate Black culture, right? So like we go from Crazy in Love into like basically pre-woke Beyonce into woke Beyonce. And then we even have like a hymn, a spiritual, African-American spiritual, lift every voice and sing, again, like just my songs are just like these spirituals, and is it fair to basically, now that she's woke, which happened, I don't know, around 2014, 15 or something, again, maybe some would say when it was politically tenable, financially tenable, to then pretend like she wrote Crazy in Love with Black culture in mind and not just to be like an early 2000s pop song about her boyfriend?
I mean, I think you're overthinking it a little bit because yeah, obviously, it's not like some big political song, but if she wants to pretend it is now, who cares? Let her do it. I get what you're saying, but I think it's overthinking it quite a bit.
I mean, I imagine at this corporate Beyonce meeting where all these people in suits are there, they're thinking about, they pick this theme out, for the performance, and then they think about the track listing and they try to find ways to change some of these older songs so that they fall in line. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. And nobody, I don't think any like big artist, maybe any artist, has like from the beginning of their career to I don't know how long's Beyonce been around, 15 years or so, like not change, had a like artistic vision, right from the get-go and never wavered from it. That just doesn't happen. I mean, plenty of artists, Prince, David Bowie, their first few records suck, and and they're working into it and everything, but you wouldn't say, oh, now that Bowie's cool, he's trying to work in, I don't know, Space Oddity or something, into this grander scheme. I think it's just, it's okay to pretend you had some big vision when you didn't at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's mildly disingenuous, but it's one of those things that I feel like, I
would prefer to I would prefer to have the songs transform so that they could be included instead of being cut because
exactly
too old or whatever.
Yeah,
you're right. I was just okay, I'm just sort of like thinking about this because I think it's a bold thing to do, and I know like people, certain Pitchfork writers would probably say that like just the fact that like just like the mere existence of like a song by a confident black woman or something, no matter what it's about, is a political sort of a statement, or has a political quality to it anyway. So I could easily be persuaded that in fact Destiny's Child songs always did celebrate like black sisterhood or something like that. But I just do think there's like a real interesting kind of like positioning here, that kind of that maybe corporate thing that you were talking about. Okay, back to the album again. Sorry, I keep going like off into stuff that's going to get me in trouble. As a live album, okay, let's pause for a minute to talk about what makes a live album great. Is it some of the stuff that you guys have been talking about, like reinventing, or what?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when it just sounds exactly like the studio record but recorded a little worse, that's boring. That's that's for the hardcore fan, if anybody. I like a live album. I mean, like I talked at the top of the show, like Bob Dylan, every tour, he like completely reinvents the songs. Whereas like if you played me a track from a tour, I could pretty much tell you what tour it's from. Rolling Thunder sounds away, 66 sounds away. That's what makes it interesting. That's what makes, me search out bootlegs and shows that aren't officially released and everything, whereas I mean, and then the Grateful Dead, same way. They play a different set every night. They play a song this way one time, and that's the only time it'll sound the way it sounded. Like those are what make an interesting live record, and not just like something to make a little extra cash or whatever. You gotta make it like a new. I mean, it's always going to be for like a, maybe not a hardcore fan, but at least somebody who's like more into it. Because, say you're just, I like a couple Bob Dylan songs. I got the greatest hits. You don't care that in 66 he played, Mr. Tambourine Man this way. You don't give a shit.
Right.
But, if you're just a little bit into it, maybe you will. So they're always like sort of that next step of fandom. But I think depending on what you do to it, changes it between big fan to hardcore fan only.
What do you think, Darren? Are live albums just inherently for hardcore fans, kind of?
I mean, I think so. I think that's what they're often designed for. I think it goes both ways. I think there are definitely some live albums, probably a lot of live albums, that are designed to just be like a greatest hits and, not really give you a true concert performance, rather just resell you the same songs, just recorded live. To me, the best live albums, just like kind of Dan was describing, are the ones that like really try to immerse you into the show, like letting you in on like the audience sounds, the in-between song banter, whatever might be happening, just to kind of, immerse you. Like, obviously you don't have to listen to like them tuning after every song or whatever, and like the the true amount of time that it takes for a concert to go through. But any level of banter, any little extras at the end of a song or before a song, I think are great.
Yeah, banter is a good. I didn't mention that, but yeah, banter is like something that really makes a live album for you.
And sometimes it just gets lost if you're only plucking out like the best songs or best performances of an entire tour. You know what I mean? And I kind of hate that. Like, I would much rather just stick to one show, maybe two shows if I absolutely have to, because I want to get the feeling of like that particular night, even if the performances were not as good.
Yeah,
whatever,
in a live album, I like a bum note here and there, or a slight misstep, or a forgotten lyric. It makes it feel like you were there. Because anytime you go to a live show, something goes wrong. Something goes wrong in a performance, and so it makes it like you were there.
Yeah, but what about maybe we shouldn't spend too much time on going outside of the realms of this topic, but basically, like, there are certain live albums that we can all agree transcend the thing we're describing, right? So I was thinking a lot this week about like Nirvana's Unplugged, which is 100% essential. It's not like a Nirvana fans only kind of live thing, like that other one is from the Muddy Banks of whatever.
Right.
So, what makes a live album transcend that? And I'm trying to, sort of get at, like, is Beyonce successfully doing that? Is she trying to do that?
I mean, I think if you look at Unplugged, to use your example, that one features the songs are in a different way than they are on the record. They're quote unquote acoustic. And then, like Darren said, lots of banter on that record.
Check that box too.
Yep.
True.
And Beyonce does both of those on this. I like Unplugged more, but maybe it's just because I like Nirvana more than I like Beyonce. But I think she does do those things. The songs are different.
It also kind of feels like she's talking to the world, and rather than like
the people in the room.
In the room, and by room we mean like a field that had like literally a million fucking people. But in a sense, like Nirvana is also talking to the world, like, because it was for a program that goes out to the world. It's not like, hey, for the room, so they sort of took extra care. Is that what's going on, Darren?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, listen to any of Nirvana's other live albums that have been released, and I can only think of maybe one that includes a whole lot of banter. You know what I mean? Like from the Muddy Banks, if I recall, has none of that. In fact, just sounds like I got suckered into buying an album full of live performances of songs I already knew. But I mean, immediately when I started listening to this, my first time with this Beyonce record, like, it checked those boxes that Dan just mentioned with Nirvana. There was banter. It felt like a single performance. There was like in between stuff. The songs all kind of like had changed, so they were at least interesting to listen to. And to me, that's essential to creating a live album that's really worth, more than one listen.
Yeah, gosh, I'm really just kind of thinking about this in real time because I didn't intend to go so deep on it. But it is interesting that, because I'm thinking about like Nirvana's Live at Reading, which is also kind of amazing. And
yes,
it might be that it's because it was designed for like a huge audience, not just like a one stop on a tour. So there's like kind of the care that goes into that. And so, but then I'm thinking like, you also can't like retcon that. You can't like just take your favorite performances over the course of a whole tour and arrange them into a live album and make that a classic. Like, that's just never really going to be a classic. It has to be like the planning stage was intended to like make a big statement with this live performance. And, Nirvana did that. Beyonce certainly does that here. And actually the documentary, gives you a lot of insight into like that pressure that she's really quite conscious of. That's kind of actually fascinating. Maybe that would make for like a good whole episode one day. But in terms of this is not my theory. I think I heard it from Stephen Hayden, but I think it's absolutely spot on and brilliant. Are live albums like the future of making music economically viable? Because greatest hits albums are basically dead. I think we've talked about that before, which the music industry must fucking hate because they cannot sell you the same shit over and over again. And in a sense, reissues are almost dead. They still kind of do, but like these expanded reissues, it just almost doesn't even make sense like in a digital streaming world, just like greatest hits albums don't. And so if bands, so basically bands like, the Grateful Dead, Fish, are, it amazes me every time, but like one of the most financially profitable bands in the world. Autechre recently released like a huge batch of live recordings. And it's like, is this the path for sort of like music to make financial sense? And it doesn't even have to be cynical, like I was kind of saying before. Like, you need band or fans to like pay for stuff more than once. So why don't you reinvent it multiple times? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I get that, and I think that's what's happening, but I think it's better than the greatest hits record. The greatest hits record, they would do that thing where they would take, just 8-9 songs that you already have on a record, but then they throw in one you don't have,
Yeah.
And then if you're a super fan, they sold it to you because you got to have that one song or 2 songs or whatever. But at least here, if you're buying this, I mean, 1, it's just streaming, so you didn't even actually pay for it. And
right.
2, at least you're getting something a little different. You're not getting just Drunk in Love again, Crazy in Love again, Say My Name again. You're getting it right. in a slightly different way. It's a similar concept, but I think it's less shitty than the old standard greatest hits record.
But can it be done like again and again? Is that kind of what you were asking, Gabe? Like, why not just continuously?
Because like, a band like Fish, right? They do this like, I guess, subscription model thing where, because what they've done is they've really emphasized that every set is going to be different and things are going to happen once and never again because there's this improvisation, there's this like kind of freedom there. They don't even have it planned out before they go into it. They're just kind of like vibing. And so, the same thing with the Grateful Dead. Like fans, love like listening over and over again and kind of hearing how these things get changed and everything. And, it's kind of amazing to think that basically like, Autechre sort of does the same thing, which is kind of amazing because they're an electronic group, but they're adding improvisation into their performances and recordings, in fact. And so they can release like a huge batch of live recordings and hardcore fans want to hear them all. And the thing is, you need in this world to like create hardcore fans again because streaming is so like disposable. You can just like listen a couple times and then never see it again. It's not like in your CD rack or anything. You need to create fans that want to hear your songs again and again, and they want to follow how you change them and evolve them. Just think about like if Vampire Weekend, and actually I haven't really listened to their new album yet, but people are saying it's kind of like Grateful Dead inspired. I think it's more like just their, those Working Man's Dead type albums, folksy sound. But imagine if every night Vampire Weekend show was different. Wouldn't you be kind of interested in hearing what they sounded like?
Yeah, I mean, I get super into things. I become that like super fan of people, and I mentioned it, but Bob Dylan, that's one. I have tons of Dylan bootlegs. I have all the shows he actually officially releases and everything, and I like it because of that. What's different, what's changed. It's just like you want to like almost study the music or whatnot. And Autechre is another one. I have all those AE lives. I've listened to them all.
Yeah.
I continuously listen to them. They're a little different because it's a little easier to like tell what Dylan did different night to night, where when it's a bunch of fucking bleeps and bloops, it all kind of sounds different. But you got to create that super fan. That's how you get money. I mean, every year Dylan releases one of these bootleg series and gets $100 from me for doing so. Autechre gets $100 from me for whatever they release, whereas but bands that don't do that, I just stream online. Maybe I'll buy a record for $15-$20 or something.
Yeah,
it's
and
a way to make money.
If you're a casual fan, that's fine. Like casual fans will buy just the album.
Exactly.
But like, am I kind of phrasing it in a clear way, Darren? Like, could more bands embrace like taking their live show really seriously, making it a unique experience again and again, and make music financially viable that way?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I fear that like you would oversaturate. Like if Vampire Weekend tried to sell me on like doing something different for every show of a tour, I just don't think there would be enough interesting things.
Think about this. Think about if they like introduced all this improvisation and they sort of changed things up and they created unique experiences, and maybe they even put a lot of effort into like, maybe not all the time, but like Beyonce here, where they stage occasionally like a big production that's like going to radically change and recontextualize their songs. Okay, so maybe they do that a lot, and you are a sort of fan, so you're just going to check out their studio albums, but you've heard that their concert in Cincinnati in 2018, of July is a contender for their best concert ever. It's must hear. Okay. So you like them enough to check out that one, and you like it enough to check out, people also say their Chicago date from 3 years earlier is really phenomenal. So you at least are willing to check that one out, and then the more hardcore fan you are, the more you want to check out. But it's like, this is like a huge untapped market, and people just need to I really believe people need to take live music more seriously, because it is the future of selling music in the streaming era.
And the thing too, in streaming, it doesn't really cost you anything to just pop that up on Spotify. You don't have to print a record of it. You don't have to print a CD of it. I'm sure you pay for mixing, really to make it nice. But like, what did this album, Beyonce's album, cost to make versus what her studio records cost? I'm sure that this one's much higher profit margin.
Yeah, well, not counting the show.
Yeah. Well, but she made ticket sales for that, so I'm sure she made it back already.
Yeah. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I mean, the more I think about it, this is kind of falls in line with like game streams, right? I mean, people are paying money to watch people play the same games over and over again, the same personalities.
That's a good point.
They're watching it for a different experience, and they get a different experience each and every time. So yeah, people are paying for that kind of stuff, and sure.
I know.
We should just put out one album, just like 12 songs, and just, recycle them and regurgitate for the rest of our lives.
You maybe could. But I just think it would be so interesting and actually like genuinely exciting, because I would love if a lot of my favorite bands like thought about live performance in this way.
I agree. I do.
So, what I want to ask about Beyonce, I find it quite interesting because, we're talking about like Grateful Dead, Fish. Okay. So that's like improvisation. That's like guitar soloing, and people are like, oh my God, the solo in like 77 Cornell, is so great.
Not Dan though. Definitely not.
No, but like Beyonce is a pop star, and there's a lot of pre-recorded stuff even here. That's why she can splice two performances together seamlessly. Everything's click tracked, everything, so for this to be like the future, I basically wonder, like, is Beyonce providing a blueprint for how pop stars can also get in on this kind of like untapped resource of selling people, reinventing new songs for hardcore fans and that kind of stuff?
I think so.
Or do you have to be Beyonce to do such a huge, like reinvention with 100 people on stage?
I think you have to be Beyonce to do it that, big and grand or whatever. But I think it does open a door for people because, if you think about it, like, there are some, but like there's no like classic live rap album, because rap doesn't like lend itself to that, to improvisation and whatnot. But like this sort of does open the door to it, and even Kanye does have like a live album. It's called a live orchestration or something, and he like performed with an orchestra. Like to do it with like pop music or things that like aren't quote unquote played live, you have to like change it to make it not just be the same thing, but the vocals are different, and so I think she is sort of opening the door for it. It takes somebody like huge to show everybody else, you know, to one, show the suits that hand out the money that this is worth making, and you know, to get people in on it. You know, you got to start with somebody huge.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because it doesn't seem like too far out of an idea. You know what I mean? Like, if you had asked me before this Beyonce album came out, if you had asked me or Dan, it seems, you know, what makes a great live album, what we would have described is essentially what Beyonce did. You know, we may have missed some of the theatrics, I guess, in there, but that's all part of like creating an experience. And like, that's what I would have said, you know, if you had asked me that, because I've listened to a fair share of live albums, and the more I think about it, the majority of those live albums in retrospect aren't very good, again, because they are just packaged, as we have said, like a greatest hits thing, and it's not about the performance or the show itself. It's just, you know, here's 22 songs from like 22 different dates or whatever. And then, but if people, like, you know, it's great that Beyonce's doing it, but I feel like you mentioned, Gabe, it's an untapped market. I mean, I think anybody could get into this, and I would be very interested if, you know, I don't know, like you mentioned Vampire Weekend, but like, basically, if anybody, you know, if somebody like Drake, or if like Kanye, like I loved Kanye's, the shows that we went to, like I would love a Kanye like live album. You know what I mean?
There was supposed to be a Yeezus movie. There was a trailer and it never came out. So Netflix, if you're listening, please buy that and put it up.
Yeah, you know, we actually haven't mentioned another classic live rap album, which is when Jay-Z teamed up with Linkin Park.
Oh God,
and
that's
reinvented
live?
his music.
I
thought so.
I didn't even know it was live. I've never listened.
Maybe
to
it's
that.
not. Maybe I'm totally wrong.
Who cares?
I think it's called Encore. Though. But anyway, so all right. But I've kind of found myself thinking, you know, like listening to this, I was like, wow, this is so huge. Is it tenable for other people to like kind of follow this model? And then I also found myself thinking, you know, because I'm pretty disillusioned with the whole poptimist thing by now, but you know, how can rock artists even compete with this, with what this is? Because it's like, you know, watching the movie, especially, it's like people, you know, hundreds of thousands of people don't go to a festival to see like four dudes, you know, like playing a guitar, you know. But anyway, so that kind of leads me to, you know, the other real big issue here is like, does this album work, you know, on its own? The question, you know, was sort of inspired. What first got me really thinking seriously about this album was, you know, Pitchfork makes this honestly insane point, or what struck me initially as insane. I seriously can't stop thinking about it, but basically about like whether albums need to work on their own or not, live albums, or maybe not even live albums. But they say Homecoming doesn't stand on its own as an album experience separate from the film. You know, right there, I would sort of translate that as not a good live album. But they say it probably doesn't need to. Beyonce and her sister Solange increasingly rely on visuals to paint a fully embodied and populated vision that includes music. Homecoming, an accompaniment to a concert film, feels as if it wasn't ever meant to be experienced in isolation. Okay, so maybe you disagree with that assessment of the album, that it actually does. It actually was meant to work on its own, as just like the concert film was. But am I crazy that originally the idea of a live album was that it should work without having had to see the show or be there? Is this a crazy point, or do they have a point that, you know, in today's age with streaming video and easy access to what it would have looked like and increasing use of like visual albums, are they making any sense?
I don't think so. I mean, when you review, you say you're reviewing the album, not the movie. You're reviewing the album, and you give it a 9 point. Was it 9.2?
3.
Oh, 9.3.
9.3.
Yeah, you give
literally
it
the high. I tried to find. I think it's the highest since Tame Impala's what was it called? Currents got a 9.3 back in like 2015.
Nice. Yeah. See, so you know, if you're reviewing that album and you have that sentence in there, that's not a 9.3 review. I disagree with them. I think that, because I didn't watch the movie and I enjoyed this record.
Right.
You know, is it something I'm going to continue to listen to in the future? Probably not. But I enjoyed the time I did spend with it. Not 9.3 enjoyed though. But you know, you either have to review the movie, and you could say the movie's a 9.3. So that whole sentence like really ruins their review. I don't get that at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because like I agree that like this album does stand on its own as a total audio experience. I do think, like I mentioned before, though, you know, having some knowledge of Beyonce as a visual artist, whether it's music videos or some other live performance, definitely helps inform this experience. If I had not seen Beyonce at all, maybe it would have fallen a little flat. Some of those. That's
a good point.
Sections,
see, that's like, I mean? that's a rabbit hole you can go down here, because they even admit, right? They're not even just talking about live albums. They're talking about Solange, who just released like basically kind of Lemonade style, like music videos in a sense for every song or something like that on her last album. And so first off, I really thought it was strange for them to say like they're implying like Beyonce and Solange are doing something new there, when like in the 90s and 80s, right, like music videos were so integral to the album experience. And so I was kind of thinking like, all right, so an album should stand on its own, especially a live album, but do albums ever stand on their own, really? Because, you know, there's sort of like an aesthetic to the band, you know, to their music videos,
for sure,
to what they look like, act like, that you can't like separate, right? So, you know, if you think about like...
You can't separate any like art into a vacuum like that, though. There's always going to be something, you know, you're always going to know something about it.
I know, but it's like think about like Nirvana's Unplugged again, right? Like you can't listen to it without seeing that stage, thinking about his suicide.
I bet I bet plenty of people that aren't as old as us have only heard the record, though. You know, it's not like that Unplugged performance is on Netflix or anything. You know, it is on like DVD. I'm sure you can probably pay to stream it, but I don't think it's just streaming anywhere. You know, I would argue that a decent amount of, you know, younger people probably haven't seen that performance.
Well, maybe that's a different question, but it's just kind of like for our generation, at least, like the people who declared it a classic, it's inseparable from the concert experience. Like, would you agree with that, Darren?
Yeah, I mean, I think it, you know, it's a complete package, and to separate it, either just visual without audio or audio without visual, is, you know, diminishing what she's trying to, you know, sell to you, basically. And I think even for me, who didn't watch it, you know, I probably owe it to myself to probably watch it as well, and it might just enhance the overall experience. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like, and, you know, you guys hate it when I talk about K-pop, but like K-pop is an industry that kind of lives on this idea of like selling you a complete package, right? So it like practically manufactures all of its bands, its groups. It has them always, every single song that comes out has an accompanying music video, and you have to watch the video if you if you really want to get the full experience. And then they go on this like very brief like show, like tour, basically, on all these like television shows, these live music performances. So like every song has choreography, like it's just a complete package, and the only way to truly enjoy it is to somehow consume all of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. And so would you say that this is like a more modern development? Like maybe that it's heightened, like it was always there. You always put out a music video and stuff, but it's like just more. It's like more in your face, because you can go on Netflix and like watch her film at any point. So it's like it doesn't have to stand on its own, because you can just now we're talking about like full length films. We're talking about like Lemonade, where there's a music video for every song. Like that wasn't really a thing of the past, you know. Before it was just like a single one video. Now it's so much more.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's modern in that it's much more like readily available. Whereas like before, you know, when we were kids, or I mean, even before we were kids, you know, you had to watch MTV all day and, you know, hope you'd see, you know, the video you wanted to see. Whereas now, if I want to see the video for, you know, Smells Like Teen Spirit, I could pull that up in less than 5 seconds, you know? It's just now you have the availability. So MTV and VH1, whatever, like wouldn't have played all of an album, like Lemonade. Like they wouldn't play an hour-long music video. I mean, maybe they would for somebody as big as Beyonce, but that would
Michael Jackson.
Exactly. It wouldn't get in like rotation over and over and over again. Where so you kind of had to just do the one single, here and there. I think now that it's the same way we've sort of talked about, like, does the double album, like mean anything anymore? Because there's no physical constraints on how much you can. If you want to sit on YouTube and watch 4 hours of Beyonce music videos, you can sit and do that. Where there was that option did not exist. More than 8-9 years ago. Even.
Yeah, I think it's like absolutely fascinating because it's like, thinking back about like the economics of music and stuff, especially live music. It used to be like a challenge. You used to have to be like, okay, so this album, we have to like sort of play well enough or something for, we have to like bring a unique experience to this so that people will actually buy this live album and not like just be, not just get ripped off or whatever. And it's almost like you maybe don't have to worry about that as much because you can kind of just like, you can release visuals and just, like ask people to watch that too. You can be like, well, we're releasing this live album. I'm afraid our performances aren't really that good that you would just want to listen to them. But we put up, and especially this is true of pop music, we put on the most amazing light show, that you've ever seen, and you're going to want to see this. And then there's kind of like this weird manipulative trick almost, because when you see it once, you never forget. Mm-hmm. I'll never be able to listen to Homecoming without remembering like visually that like sort of spectacular pyramid of just people like, writhing around. And, there's something like kind of weird and frightening about the future of music.
But, I mean, think about Stop Making Sense, Talking Heads. That's a record you can listen to, but it's also like the movie is all sorts of theatrical. It's not just the band just playing the song. There's all the big suit, the dancing with the light stand and all. Like that is just sort of a 80s version of this record.
Yeah, you're right.
Like that record isn't the best Talking Heads live album.
That's true.
I feel like that record, without seeing the movie, is not a classic.
Yeah, you got to kind of like think back on the movie when you listen to it.
Exactly. It's
way more fun.
I don't think if somebody just listened to that record, they wouldn't be like, oh man, that's a classic Talking Heads record. But I think we all would agree that movie is a classic.
Yeah. God. See, I think this Beyonce album, for some reason, it just like it makes me like question so many things I thought I understood about music. But in the end, did you guys? It sounds like you both enjoyed the album. You think it's a good album?
I mean, like I said, I'm not going to keep listening to it. It's not really like my kind of music that I listen to all the time. But yeah, I mean, it was perfectly enjoyable to listen to at work a few times. And I wasn't ever like, oh, God, gotta put this on. It was perfectly enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. Like Dan, I don't think I'm going to return to it too often. I don't necessarily return to Beyonce in general all that often, but yeah, I mean, this had all of the elements of a live album that I liked, and I felt like Beyonce put on a compelling show. You know what I mean? Like I didn't really feel bored throughout. It's long, like getting through the entire thing is very long, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's got some of the best pop songs of our times on it, and I think she's an incredible performer. I mean, I realize that it's cut from two different shows, but like you also, when I listen to live albums, I'm always listening to like how well the singer is able to perform, especially against their original tracks. And like Beyonce is known for, she's got an incredible vocal talent, and some of her songs are like impossible to like sing. And even for her, she does kind of like take some, like on that song, like one of the last songs,
like Love on Top.
Love on Top is like an incredible vocal performance. But you know what? She actually does go through with some of like the highest notes, like towards the end, and like, goddamn, like at the end of the concert to be able to do that is
she does, yeah,
incredible.
Yeah, that sort of does tie back to that like Oh, this is interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. Because, we were talking about like the Grateful Dead Fish thing. It's like, like the virtuosity of the guitar solos and stuff. But in a sense, pop stars actually do have like a virtuoso quality to their music, which is usually their voice. And you could dazzle people with your like, those like Christina Aguilera style, like vocal fireworks or whatever. And you could have people being like, oh my God, you got to hear the show in Minneapolis from this year because she does this thing with her voice, man. So that is kind of interesting. But I also found, I agree with what you said, Darren, that as I was listening to this, I was kind of stunned. I mean, it is so long, and there are a lot of absolutely classic pop songs here. I mean, this is another reason why greatest hits albums are useful, because you don't really appreciate it while it's happening. And then when it like is all presented in front of you, like, look at all the things this person did. And you're kind of like, God damn, this woman has like, at least 15 of these songs are like, would be like in the top, 250 pop songs of the last like 2 decades. Did you have that feeling of just being pretty kind of impressed retrospectively, Dan?
Yeah, because you do forget that like Say My Name was like such a banger, and even some of the tinier songs, that weren't quite as ubiquitous. Like, yeah, you sort of like, until they're all in front of your face, one after another. It's nuts to have an hour and 49 minute like concert where somebody who's not really, that big of a fan knows 99% of all the songs, like that is very impressive.
Yeah, when I looked at the track list, I was like, I don't feel like I know like a whole lot of these songs.
But some of them, once you heard it, you knew it.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I also have a little bonus question here. Do you guys think that Beyonce ever had a better song than Say My Name? And if so, what is it? Or what is at least a contender?
Yeah, I mean, that's hard off the top of my head.
God, I might say that like Drunken Love is like a contender. Formation is a contender.
Formation might be, Formation might be better.
Yeah. Better,
but also, is it just because like Say My Name feels like when I was in middle school?
The nostalgia.
Yeah,
you're saying,
or just like it sounds dated.
It's an objectively like amazing song, I think. But I was trying to think like, damn, she kind of peaked then, even though she, this is all like a lot of great stuff, but I was like, damn, I don't think she's ever topped Say My Name. Maybe some people would feel differently. Would you ever, another minor question, would you ever choose to listen to these over the original songs? And is that even important?
I wouldn't here because, like I said, I'm not that big of a Beyonce fan. But so, like, if I'm going to listen to Beyonce, it's already sort of a rare event, and I'm just going to listen to the record. But with live albums in general, yeah, I do that a lot, especially with, like, Bob Dylan. I know so many of those records, like, note for note for... True, yeah. There's not a single thing left in the record to, like, discover, and so that can make it, like, a little boring. So I supplement that by just listening to live versions that I, might get a little surprise in.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, well, I guess to answer your question, Gabe, like, no, I don't think I would listen to the songs on here in place of the studio ones, largely because a lot of them are, they only have excerpts of the entire song, like, it's not even the full song. So I think if I was in the mood for a live album from Beyonce, I would just, throw the entire record on.
Yeah.
And that happens from time to time with, like, bands. We keep going back to Nirvana, because I think they're a great example, and kind of to what, Dan was pointing out, that, like, the studio record so well, that sometimes you just want to change it up just a little bit and listen to something like a live album and get just a different feel, different take on all these songs that so well.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder if, like, you were talking about like Say My Name sounding a little dated, or something like, I would say that a lot of Beyonce's hits I really like and are like, they're solid additions to your banger playlist. But I would never listen to something as old as like Crazy in Love, that like kind of early 2000s pop stuff.
Like the original one. You're right.
And yet, I don't know if I would choose this live version, but I wonder if this live album would just kind of like give me a different perspective on Crazy in Love. I wouldn't think of it as like a dated kind of early 2000s pop song. I might think of it more as like, you know, one of Beyonce's, the modern idea of Beyonce's songs, like this woke, you know, like powerhouse. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I was trying to find out, like, she's recontextualizing these songs, and if you would actually think of the original Crazy in Love differently after hearing this, then I would say she really succeeded.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because Crazy in Love's a good example of that, because if, you know, throwing that song on, I would not be that interested. You know, you feel like you've heard it like a million times, and it's, you know, it just hasn't aged all that well, I think.
Right.
But man, when I heard it here, I was like, okay, like I can get down to this, because it's at the top of the album, and if this song fails or falls flat, then the rest of the album is in trouble.
Yeah.
But it held it together.
Yeah, that was actually really a genuinely thrilling moment in the movie, because she kind of like struts out, and it's like weird because, like I said, like half of the people are just still on her pyramid there, and then she starts doing Crazy in Love, and then, you know, when it goes to that like you know, like everybody starts moving. It switches from like yellow to pink, and you're like, am I dreaming? Like, how did that happen? And you're just like momentarily stunned by how fucking spectacular it is. I mean, like, it's, I gotta say, even like in the film, those little like documentary footage type parts like get quite tiring, but and it makes the whole thing kind of drag. But it's like, just, I can really just sort of imagine that being there must have been absolutely stunning. Okay, so a couple other things just to wrap up. You know, we talked about like, will people kind of follow Beyonce's lead? Would that be a good thing or bad thing? You know, I guess we kind of touched on that, but I was just trying to imagine, like, we've talked about this before, maybe a little bit, but in some ways it's a shame that the Greatest Hits album has died, because there are artists, you know, somebody like, I think of like Gucci Mane or Ray Shremmerd or something, who are just so inconsistent, but they have so many like absolute hits, okay? And for some reason, it's really hard to imagine Gucci Mane making a great live performer, you know? But if you could somehow like recontextualize all of his like greatest songs into one presentation, you know, it would make these inconsistent artists, it would be a masterpiece, you know?
Yeah, I mean, as big of a Gucci fan as I am, I do agree with you. You know, like his and a lot of Trap's like biggest problem is, it's like the quantity over quality. And so, yeah, like if you had the greatest hits every 5-10 years and you just got the quality instead of the quantity, like, yeah, you know, they would be, you know, so much better. I think maybe, you know, someone like Gucci, I have not seen live, unfortunately, but I'm sure, you know, he's not the greatest live performer ever. But I think maybe the playlist is sort of where that kind of artist resides and takes over their greatest hits, you know.
That's true.
You know, especially with like Spotify, you know, they make those like This Is Gucci Mane playlist and stuff.
That's true.
You know, they sort of make the greatest hits. And since nowadays, you know, it doesn't get printed, you know, to vinyl or CD or anything, it's just streaming. What's it really matter if Spotify put together a playlist, or if the record label, you know, quote unquote, made a greatest hits album? It would be the same amount of money, you know, streaming wise either way. So I don't know if it really matters for these artists that don't, you know, have the spectacle behind it to like warrant the live record.
Yeah, I guess I can sort of transitioning to closing thoughts here. You know, I think about like, I just think that, because I had that thing I was talking about where I'm just like, wow, I can't believe really how amazing her body of work is as a whole. And I was thinking about, you know, like other artists, and, you know, I would originally have thought that the idea of listening to a live Beyonce album would be very unappealing, you know, like,
Agreed.
I can't imagine anything, like almost anything sucking more than that. But I was thinking about like, okay, so, you know, like somebody like Rihanna, I bet I would have a similar feeling. And I bet there are a bunch of other artists that I don't even realize right now, where if you just put their whole like body of work together, all the highlights, I would be kind of like amazed, like, holy shit, like for the last like 20 years, this person has like just nailed it over, you know, so many times. This is like I didn't realize they were a legend. You know, I just thought they were like kind of a pop star that's been around for a while. And, you know, and then I sort of like just thought that this album, it kind of presented this like amazing opportunity where honestly, I don't imagine like Rihanna being an interesting live performer in any way, but I do kind of believe that Beyonce has given like a blueprint here where maybe she could pull off something spectacular and it would have the same effect of like kind of putting her among the greats instead of just sort of like a, because these are singles artists and that's just the world we live in, especially in the streaming age. And you know what I'm saying? Like that would almost be like kind of an exciting, cool thing.
Yeah, I think those big pop artists are the people who could benefit this. Rihanna's a great example, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think, not only Rihanna's like discography or, career, whatever, of her own singles, like she's also appeared on a lot of singles. So it'd be really interesting if she somehow found an interesting way to like mesh all of that together too,
Yeah, you're right. And I think that Beyonce is like, she has a sort of celebrated guest appearance on that Mi Gente song by J Balvin. And, so she does get to include that here as part of her body of work, which you wouldn't normally do,
Right. Lady Gaga, I think, would be a contender to really do something interesting here, with that format.
If Drake put out, he's put out a lot of good albums, but if he put out like a, 3-hour live album and it was just like literally all of his biggest hits, like done in the most spectacular, like performed live at the top of that like thing that's in Toronto that he's sitting on the cover of, Views or something like that, like just something huge and spectacular, you'd be like, I cannot fucking believe how many classic songs he has. I just think this is such a cool opportunity, and not just for major pop stars, but like we were saying, the live album, I really believe that it could be a path for like indie artists to make actual money, because they're not going to make money from Spotify streams ever. You have to be like Beyonce size to like live off that. But if they could like make dedicated fans and they could put effort into their live performances, they could follow Beyonce's lead a little bit, believe it or not. Like Beyonce could save indie rock is what I'm saying. Can you believe it?
She really could. That's that's a hot take.
Yeah. We all have Queen Bee to thank.
Exactly. All right, well, I think that's enough for this week. What do you think? We'd love to read your thoughts on the air. You can email us the email, popshieldpod@gmail.com. Next episode in 2 weeks, and we're talking Tool. We're going back to high school. We're getting ready for the new record. So if you like the show, help us out by subscribing and leaving us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. Stay connected: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. All of that is at popshieldpod. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
See ya.
So long.